Yeah, sorry for the late upload. The weekend was a full-blown circus on my end. Life came at me faster than Inter's backline trying to track Kvaratskhelia. But hey, better late than never, right? Let's just call it tactically delayed, like a good old-fashioned VAR check. Somewhere in this improbable season, a door opened. Maybe it was cracked open by the sound of the old guard collapsing, by the thud of Real Madrid getting smothered, or by Bayern Munich evaporating into the mist. And through that door, the misfits walked in, the nearly men, the chronic almosts. And then this happened. Paris Saint-Germain, a team so often synonymous with extravagant failure, actually won the Champions League. Not just won, dominated, demolished. They did it with elegance and venom. 5-0. Inter didn't just lose, they got erased. And in case this season hadn't already gone off script, Crystal Palace won the FA Cup. Tottenham, the museum exhibit of nearly was, won the Europa League. Bologna won something in Italy, and the only people more surprised than the fans were the players. Aberdeen added to the absurdity. And now, PSG. That cursed, haunted, billionaire science project finally got the experiment to work. The beaker didn't explode. The frog didn't turn into a meme. They won the Champions League. This is the year of droughts ending, of statues crumbling, of history getting rewritten by people who never used to hold the pen. PSG lifted their first European Cup under the floodlights in Munich, and somehow it felt like justice. Not justice for PSG, specifically. They've been football's flashy overthinker for years. But for chaos, for drama, for the idea that eventually everyone gets their turn in the sun, even if they spent a decade tanning under UV lamps pretending it was real. The match itself? It wasn't close. From the first whistle, PSG looked like they'd swallowed a lightning bolt. 12 minutes in, Hakimi made it 1-0 with a finish so calm he could have been buttering toast. Then Du, who we'll get to because my heart is still recovering, doubled the lead with a deflected strike that could have turned Sommer into stone. At 20 minutes, it was 2-0. At that point, the game didn't feel over, but it did feel doomed if you were Inter. You could already smell the scorched air around them. Inter looked stunned, not sleepy, not unlucky. Stunned, like someone had replaced their boots with concrete blocks. They couldn't string 3 passes together without tripping over PSG's pressing. Their backline, usually made of granite, turned to wet cardboard. Inzaghi stood on the sideline with the blank expression of a man watching his favorite espresso machine explode. And PSG? They were electric. Kvaratskhelia tormented Inter like a wasp in a wineglass. Dembele zigzagged around defenders like he was trying to sign his name on the pitch in cursive. Every time they came forward, it looked like a jailbreak. This wasn't a win. It was a coronation. And not just any coronation. This was the crowning of a team that's been mocked, memed, and minimized for years. That team just became European royalty. And look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I don't remember all the humiliations, the remontadas, the collapses. Barcelona, Manchester United, Bayern. Pick a name. PSG's got a wound shaped like it. But this wasn't healing. This was vengeance. Not in the petty, bitter way. This was catharsis. This was PSG telling the world, we're not a headline anymore. We're history now. This season turned football into a dream machine. Everyone got their fairy tale. And PSG, they got the one where the dragon finally breathes fire without burning down its own castle. Across Europe, you could hear the glass ceilings shattering, the velvet rope clubs being kicked open. Every team that's ever had to say next year looked at PSG lifting that trophy and thought, why not us? Why not us? Because if PSG can win the Champions League, if that club, with all its ghosts and golden chains, can put together 90 minutes of pure, ruthless poetry, then who's to say the rest of us are cursed? This game wasn't just a final. It was a reboot. And that's just the beginning. It's funny how quickly a Champions League final can stop feeling like a final and start feeling like a guided tour through a crime scene. That's what the first half was. Not a contest, but a broadcast of Inter's slow, confused unraveling. And PSG? They were the ones holding the scissors. From the first whistle, you could feel the tension coil around the Allianz Arena, but only for about 3 minutes. Then PSG settled. Then PSG struck. And when Hakimi tapped in that opening goal, 12 minutes in, there was something symbolic about it. Not just because he's one of the few players who'd been dragged through the ghost train of PSG's recent European failures. No, it was how easy it looked, like someone forgot to tell Inter, that the match had started. The cross came from Desire Du, whose name now reads more like a prophecy, and Hakimi drifted into the 6-yard box like he was arriving at a spa appointment. No marker, no urgency, just a gentle finish and a not-so-gentle reminder that this PSG team had absolutely no interest in easing into this final. 8 minutes later, just as Inter were still trying to download the defensive patch update, Du made it 2-0. A counterattack so fast it felt illegal. Dembele sliced the pitch open with a pass that could have doubled as a surgical tool, and when Du's volley took a massive deflection off DeMarco, it was like the ball itself wanted to be part of the celebration. Sommer was helpless. Inter were stunned. And somewhere in the press box, someone had already started writing the obituary. From there, the first half just descended into PSG flexing and Inter folding. It wasn't so much a tactical mismatch as it was an existential one. PSG looked like a team finally playing in their own story. Inter looked like they had wandered onto the wrong stage. Inter had no shots on target in the first 45 minutes. Not one. Lautaro Martinez was about as visible as a ghost at a rave. Thuram had one header, which was basically the football equivalent of shouting into the void. Even Barella, usually a buzzing little wasp of energy, was just chasing shadows and grimacing into the abyss. Meanwhile, PSG's midfield looked like it was powered by caffeine and revenge. Vitinha was everywhere, buzzing, orchestrating, cleaning up the messes he didn't even make. Neves and Fabian were metronomes. Even Marquinhos, quietly aging into one of those players who's never flashy but always vital, had that back line locked down like a museum vault. You kept waiting for the moment PSG would fall back into their old habits. The nerves, the stumbles, the "oh no, here we go again" vibes. But it never came. Instead, they just kept going. And even when they missed chances, Kvaratskhelia especially, who seemed determined to complete the hat trick of almost goals, you could feel the tide hadn't turned. The scoreline said 2-0 at halftime, but emotionally it felt like 4. And then the second half started. You know that cliche about a team coming out of the tunnel with purpose? Inter came out like they were being forced to attend a seminar on why their season was over. By the hour mark, PSG were basically playing jazz, freestyling, blowing the game wide open. That third goal? Oh my. Dembele to Vitinha to Du, and this time no deflection, no luck, just pure, razor-sharp composure. The ball slid into the bottom corner like it belonged there. At 3-0, PSG didn't celebrate like it was over. They celebrated like it was finally happening. 10 minutes later, because apparently it wasn't enough, Kvaratskhelia made it 4. His finish was clinical, like he'd been bottling up all his earlier misses and poured them into one perfect one-on-one. Sommer came out, and Kvaratskhelia just lifted it over him with the calm of a man closing a window during a light breeze. And then the 5th. Oh, the 5th. Mayulu, off the bench, gets in on the party. Barcola dances around like he's got cheat codes activated, plays it back to Mayulu, and bang. 5-0. The kind of goal that looks like it was made in a lab. Except it was improvised on the spot, like jazz, like theater, like they were just showing off at that point. From start to finish, PSG played like a team who had waited long enough. There was no tension, no fear, no late panic, just release, just dominance, just a team rewriting their story one goal at a time. Inter, meanwhile, just withered. By the end, they weren't even fighting. They were watching PSG parade through them, watching the trophy they'd imagined lifting drift further and further away. Watching the clock, probably. Waiting to be let off the ride. So that's how it ended. 5-0. In a final. In a Champions League final. Not a fluke. Not a miracle. Just PSG finally becoming the team they always threatened to be. And the strangest part? It felt inevitable. What makes a match like this so fascinating isn't just the goals. It's how they echo off the identity of the teams. Two clubs with weight behind their names, but such different kinds of weight. Paris Saint-Germain and Inter Milan. You could write a thesis on how differently these teams walk through football's halls. One is the restless upstart turned luxury project, always the loudest in the room, always trying to look like they belong at the head of the table. The other, Inter are history. Silk and steel. A club that has tasted real glory, the kind that sticks to your skin for decades. And on this night, none of that mattered. Let's start with PSG. It's easy to forget now, in the afterglow of a 5-0 demolition, that this club has spent the last 10 years collecting jokes more than trophies. They were the punchline, the bloated project. The club that would spend $200 million and still get eliminated by a team with a transfer budget the size of a vending machine. That was the identity, and they wore it like an accidental tattoo. But this version, this was not that club. Luis Enrique gave them something PSG never really had: structure. A real football team, not a collection of names on a t-shirt. And tonight, they played with a kind of serene violence. There was no panic, no showboating, just wave after wave of movement, passing, pressing, probing, like they were peeling back Inter's defense one layer at a time, looking for the soft spot. And Inter, well, where do you even begin? They looked like what they are: a good, well-drilled team that just got caught in the teeth of something bigger than them. It's not that Inter were bad, though let's be honest, they weren't great. It's that they looked startled, like someone had stolen the blueprint and they didn't know how to build without it. This is a team built on defensive solidity, on midfield balance, on experience. But when none of that works, when your spine breaks under pressure, then what? Their midfield, usually so dependable, got eaten alive. Calhanoglu couldn't dictate. Mkhitaryan was a ghost. Barella tried to kick something into gear, but every time he looked up, there were 3 PSG players already closing the door in his face. And that defense? Usually a brick wall. Tonight, a paper screen in a thunderstorm. Bastoni, Acerbi, Pavard, all of them made to look like they were chasing shadows on roller skates. The high line was brave, sure, but it was also suicidal against a PSG attack built for speed and rhythm. Inter had dreams of a treble this season. A genuine, full-fat European treble, but it all came undone at the worst possible time. They went from contenders to spectators in less than 20 minutes. And maybe that's the saddest part. There wasn't even a dramatic collapse, just a slow, inevitable slide into irrelevance. And maybe that's the biggest difference between these two teams tonight. PSG played with memory. They remembered the heartbreak. They remembered the collapses. They remembered what it felt like to be laughed at, to be pitied. Inter looked like they came in expecting a final. PSG came in chasing redemption. It's wild how finals can be decided long before kickoff. Not by tactics, not by lineups, but by intent. One team walked onto that pitch like they had something to prove to the universe. The other walked on like they were hoping their resume would be enough. It wasn't. And now we get to the part that hurts the most. If you were wearing blue and black, anyway. Let's talk about the individuals. The names that blinked on the screen, that fans clung to with hope, that journalists circled in red before kickoff. Because in a final like this, where the scoreline could have been from a video game, some players were conducting the symphony while others were just trying to play the triangle without dropping it. We start, of course, with Desire Du. What a name. What a performance. 19 years old and playing like he's been fed nothing but Champions League finals since birth. He didn't just score. He painted the game with his fingerprints. The assist for Hakimi was subtle brilliance, the kind of pass you don't notice until it's already changed the match. Then the goal. Deflected, sure, but you earn those with intention. The second goal? Ice in the veins. And no, this is not normal. 19-year-olds aren't supposed to look this unbothered in the biggest match of their lives. They're supposed to be jittery, nervous. They're supposed to survive the night, not own it. But that's the thing. Du didn't survive. He arrived. Then there's Kvaratskhelia. If Du was the conductor, Kvaratskhelia was the soloist. That goal, PSG's fourth, was vintage him, darting in behind, gliding into space like gravity had taken the night off, and lifting the ball over Sommer like he was flicking a switch. Yes, he missed a couple earlier. Yes, his finishing looked more erratic than elegant in the first half. But that goal, that moment, it was worth every miss. You score that in a Champions League final and no one remembers the build-up. They remember the explosion. Hakimi, too. He kicked the door open early. The ghost at the back post. How does a right back show up in the 6-yard box without a single defender tracking him? It's not magic. It's IQ, timing, instinct. You only get those goals if you read the game like a novel instead of a manual. And let's talk about Vitinha. He didn't get the goal or the headline, but he was the pulse. The lungs. Every time Inter tried to settle into rhythm, he disrupted it. Every time PSG needed composure, he supplied it. He played like he was allergic to mistakes. Dembele? He might never be the most efficient player in the world, but my God, he was everywhere. He pressed, passed, poked, 2 assists, count them. Both of them surgical, both of them cruel. When Dembele is locked in, he's less of a winger and more of a high-speed hallucination. And then there's Mayulu. On the pitch for about as long as it takes to microwave a burrito. And what does he do? Just scores one of the best goals of the night. A few 1-2s with Barcola, a drop of the shoulder, and a shot so pure you could bottle it. That's not a garbage time goal. That's a remember me next season goal. Meanwhile, in the other camp, Summer. 5 goals conceded and not one of them really his fault. That's the worst part. He was the only thing between PSG and a cricket score. Inter didn't collapse because of him. They collapsed despite him. Martinez? Missing. You could have put a mannequin in his place and the game would have played out the same. Thuram looked frustrated from the first whistle. Every run was mistimed. Every touch felt like a what-if. Barella tried. He always does. He was scrapping for loose balls like they were gold coins. But there's only so much you can do when your midfield partners are fading into the fog. A Serbian Bastoni, they'll have nightmares of Kvaratskhelia weaving through them. Pavard got twisted into spaghetti more than once. Kalhanoglu, the supposed engine, barely revved. You don't lose 5-0 in a Champions League final because one player has a bad game. You lose 5-0 when your entire lineup gets outthought, outfought, and outrun. And PSG, for once, they weren't the ones folding under pressure. They were the ones applying it. Every player looked like they believed, like they knew. Not hoped, not prayed. Knew, and that's what changes you. So here it is, the end of the game. The end of the wait. Paris Saint-Germain, after all the jokes, all the collapses, all the unbearable could-have-beens, have finally done it. Not by accident, not by luck, but by stepping into the arena and crushing the occasion. This has been Across the Pitch. Over and out.